you happened to have taken a creative liberty or two with the lore of a particular belief system in your story. Just a little bit of you mixed in with a lot of bit of it. Since publishing, however, all of the hateful comments and the upset letters have been not ceased flowing in. How could you have avoided this? Attack on Table. Welcome to Attack on Table, where Ryan and I are trying to have as many guests as possible on, especially with... Actually, you know what? I'm going to let Ryan tell you all about this new segment. We're down to what?
We're down to Fitz, Sean. This is our kind of subcategory on the AOTs, where we're hosting a guest that we believe can talk at length about a certain subject and potentially educate Sean and I on some things, and maybe we can become better writers. That's the end goal, I think.
And for our episode tonight, the topic is respecting source material with a little bit of an eye on mythology and religion. We have the author of the Devil You Know series, or is it the Devil You Know series? The answers are coming from Ben Schenkman.
Hi, folks.
How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, and I can, in fact, talk at length. That's not a problem.
So, just to bring everybody in, if they haven't seen your interview video with us, can you give us kind of a brushing up on the overall arching story of the Devil You Know series, and what kind of mythology you're kind of pulling from in that, or the religion, what you're borrowing from to use in your story?
It's been a while since we talked, so I'm going to give you a number of things because I've kind of made incorporating real world mythology and religion into all of my book series. I've actually got three different series going right now. So we've got The Devil You Know, which consists of 3 books, and that's really kind of a look at things through a take on the Abrahamic religions, so God and the devil. But then that series also starts branching outside of the Abrahamic stuff and into more world religion. And I will say that I've taken the most liberties when it comes to that series, but also trying to be as true as is reasonably possible. My next series that I published, the first book of the series, is called The Chronicles of Corbin Pierce. And that first book, Let Sleeping Gods Lie, specifically is looking at that magic system and world through an animist lens, where everything has a spirit and an energy, specifically with a focus on the myths and the legends of southern Connecticut in New England, with some of the indigenous tribes there, specifically a myth from the Quinnipiac tribe. So that's another place where I worked with a lot of source material. And then in my third series, The Cycle of Ash, which starts with My Brother's Keeper, it's a Jewish urban fantasy. I am Jewish. Of all the things that I've written about, this one's actually closest to my own cultural roots. But nonetheless, it's a by the book, the magic system, and that is based entirely on Jewish scripture. So yeah, I've got plenty of irons in the fire when it comes to writing real religion and mythology and folklore into your stories.
I think what's interesting about having you on and being able to talk to this is you're not picking any dead mythologies or religions Greek mythology or anything like that. I'm just assuming, just based off of what you just said, I don't know if a Minotaur shows up in your books anywhere or anytime, but if you're working with ones where there are people who are practicing these religions, they pay attention to this folklore, they have ties to it and everything. So I liked what you said earlier about you're taking creative liberties, but there's a line you don't want to cross. It kind of feels where you're just feel like you're outright being disrespectful. Am I right to say that?
You are 100%. The one thing that I try to make sure that I don't do is, well, number one, I don't want to lampoon any particular religion, whether I agree with its tenets or not. Like,
Okay.
that's not what I'm here for. I am not Christian. Like I said, I am Jewish, so maybe I've taken a little bit more liberties with the Christian mythology, but I'm still doing it in as respectful, but also a expansive way as possible. Like, my first series is very diverse when it comes to that. Like, it's got a lot of LGBT representation. It's got other cultural diversity, and nonetheless, I'm still not making fun of the religions. But also, like, I don't want to portray any particular one of them as like the villain. It's not like, oh, the villain of this story is the Catholic Church. Like, I'm not here for that either. So yeah, there are definitely some lines that I don't want to cross as far as like being respectful to the source material.
Yes. Okay. Um, I wonder if you are of the opinion that there is maybe like some definable way to say that line, like making any one particular belief system the villain. It feels like a good one, if maybe not a little bit far past, depending on which one you are actually utilizing in your story. What would you say is there anything else that like kind of directs your compass when you're writing and when you're researching and everything, that kind of tells you like, that might be too much, or I can do this is okay? What do you use to kind of direct you when you're putting those stories together? Is it like research, or is it talking to people? Take us through that a little bit.
I mean, it's both. A lot of it. So everything is going to start with research, unless you have like someone in your back pocket of whatever culture, religion, or otherwise that you're looking to write about or write from that perspective. So, couple things. First, intent matters, but also what story you're telling matters. If you're not telling the story from the perspective of that culture, and it's a culture that you're not a part of, then the bar is a little bit lower. So like, a lot of it really depends on how in depth you're getting. Like, I include some things in my stories for sake of including them, for sake of adding a diverse cast of characters, adding other cultures. But if I'm not writing from that perspective, so long as I'm not like trying to portray something accurately other than its existence, like, that's the first bar. Are you trying to do more than that? Because if you're not, you can probably get away with just doing some research yourself and making sure that you're not just screwing it up just on the facts. But then once you start getting into characters that are maybe a part of or inspired by or represent or otherwise are more engaged in those cultures or religions, it gets deeper than that. So, as an example, I am not an indigenous person. I did not write Let Sleep in God's Lie from the perspective of an indigenous person, because that's not my story to tell. However, I still wanted to incorporate and honor the myths and legends, and there's a supporting character in the book that is a member of one of the local tribes. That's also the tribe that I managed to speak with, like, the clan mother of, to get feedback on how I can respectfully include the material, some feedback on some questions that I had. She actually was like an early reader for me in the story, so I could get feedback on how I incorporated things. But I will say, like, no culture is a monolith. No one person represents it, because, for example, this is clan mother of the Golden Hill Poggashits in Trumbull, Connecticut, and she had no constructive feedback other than the book on the book, other than like, that was fun. Good luck. I hope that you sell a lot of books. And then I had another early reader who happened to be of a different tribe. She's Anishinaabe, and she had a lot more feedback as far as things that she did not like about my portrayal of this supporting character. And a lot of it came down to choice and agency. And I fixed those things. Like, as soon as she gave me the feedback, I said, you know what, you're right. And I would have let this go to print and someone would have had a problem with it. Did that mean that I was like disrespecting the material? Not necessarily. However, one reader had a strong opinion on the way that this character was acting, enough that as soon as she told me, I was like, that makes sense, and I will change it. And that's why, like, it's really important to not just do your research, not just talk to people who can represent pieces of the culture or religion that you're looking to write from, but then potentially also engage like sensitivity readers. And sensitivity readers aren't about being sensitive. They're about like making sure that the material that you're writing with, you're not being offensive, culturally appropriative, or otherwise like a jerk.
Okay. Ryan and I were just talking while we were setting up about that, because there are a lot of examples of stories that are out there a little bit. And Ryan, you can jump in and correct me if I misspeak or anything. I'll allow it just this once.
Okay, thank you.
But we're kind of firm on the whole, like, if you're creating something, it's your creation. You have the right to try. If it's going to go wrong, that's your fault and everything. I like you kind of come off like you're just devoted to being accurate as you possibly can be, because why would you be offended if not? But there is a certain point where I guess you would say like that kind of stuff is just flat out ignorant, and the sensitivity reader thing seems like it might get a bad rep from that perspective that we sit at, where it's like, it is your story. Do you have to kowtow to people who might be offended by it, or just tell them to put the book down if they don't like it, get their money back, whatever? What do you think, Ryan? Help me out here.
Well, I mean, I think, getting into the conversation, and I feel like that we might be creating a little bit too much distance here, but getting into the conversation of whether or not you find value in sensitivity reader group, I would say on its face, I kind of understand having that feedback for general purposes, because I don't think anyone should necessarily change anything about their story simply because someone might not like an aspect of it.
If it's important to the story.
If it feels like I would use that more as a sounding board for, does it feel like I've parodied your culture? Yeah. That would be my concern, because like I may want to represent something. I may even want to represent something that is not necessarily like a great look, but I don't want it to feel like I'm making fun of anything. I don't want it to feel like I'm making light of it. Like if we're gonna have a conversation, we might as well have an honest one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would use that kind of feedback as a measure of, does it feel like I'm attempting to make fun of something, or that I'm not taking the source material as seriously as you would think I should? That would be a different conversation.
Yeah.
I would ask, do you feel, Ben, do you feel like an author has like an obligation to remain faithful to original mythology or religion?
So thank you for the question, because this is we're linked up, because I was going to go right to this, which is, you have an obligation to be intentional. You have an obligation to write like you mean to do what you're doing. And just to be clear, let's go back to something I learned recently is in the sensitivity area, there's a push to rebrand it a bit to be sensitivity editors, because the reality is they're not reading to tell you whether they liked the story. They're reading to tell you whether or not you have held up whatever it is that you want them to read about in a way that is usually respectful or accurate or both. And you don't have an obligation to be accurate. You have an obligation to intend to change things if in fact you're going to do that. So like, just as an example, you get a lot of urban fantasy that likes to dive into like South American indigenous culture, like Aztec warriors and stuff like that. And I think a lot of times it gets a little bit, it gets very fast and loose, because while there is like a resurgence in the world of Reconstructionist religions, and also just there are still lineages of folks from the Aztecs who are practicing similar to the way that they practiced then, there's just not like a big enough constituency that they're going to come for you if you put stuff in your books that they don't like. But just the reason I mentioned that is like, people play fast and loose with that stuff all the time. We're going to bring a feathered serpent deity into this story because Quetzalcoatl is cool. But like, they don't care about using the material faithfully, or again, you don't have an obligation to get it accurate. You have an obligation to decide what you want to do with it. And I think it's actually an opportunity that a lot of authors miss out on when they just see something cool and they say, I'm going to put that in my book, and they do. But they miss the details. But a lot of the details, like mythology, is fascinating and broad and deep. And the ideas that I've come up with for my plots and my stories and my characters, simply by reading enough about the different pieces of mythology to be inspired by all of the neat, intricate details of them, it's an opportunity that many people miss, because they're really only scratching the bare surface of mythology and world religion to like rule of cool something into their story.
Yeah. And I'm with you 100% on the whole thing of like, if you're going to have a feathered serpent deity in your book, or even if you're just labeling it as a monster or whatever you're doing, depending on what type of story you're writing, you don't have to call it Quetzalcoatl.
No.
Just, it's hard to spell. It's hard to say. There are easier things to do. You could name it something else. It could easily be some kind of a dragon or anything like that. But, and that kind of cherry picking or whatever is a good term for it. Like, you're taking the pieces that you want and you're just making the argument, if I'm assuming correctly, that maybe just name it something else. If you're wanting to be like inspired by that image wise, and maybe, I don't know, behavior wise even, for this thing in your book, call it something else.
Maybe. Again, it gets down to make a conscious choice. All I want, authors, if you're listening, all I want you to do is make a conscious choice to do what you do when it comes to spirituality, religion, and folklore. So like, Ryan, kind of like to what you were saying is, we don't have to be accurate. All I want is for people to acknowledge that they're not being accurate. I don't mean like you got to put it in your book, just like in your head, acknowledge to yourself that like, you can call it the Aztec serpent god, whatever you want to do. Again, we make decisions, and then when we hit the button to publish, assuming that you're an indie publisher or you have a traditional publisher that hits the button for you, but when you hit the button, you have rolled the dice on what readers are going to think about your book, and the choices that you make are going to either, and I'm realizing I'm mixing my gambling metaphors because I had dice and now it's cards, but like, you're either stacking the deck for yourself or against yourself, in that if you're going to accidentally lampoon a culture in a book, you're going to turn people off. If you did it on purpose, then own that. Accept that that's a potential consequence of what you've done, and that's fine. You get to make whatever choice you want. Like, Chuck Palahniuk did not worry who he was going to offend when he wrote his books. And so, like, you make conscious choices about the things that you put in there, and if you do not care about the public opinion about your magic system, spirituality, supernatural creatures, monsters, whatever, then that's your choice.
Okay.
Well, I can get behind the argument 100% that, like, if that is a road you're in and you're creating those things and you do put more effort into respecting that, I do think you will walk away ultimately with a deeper, kind of cooler magic system or society that you've created because you've taken the time to think of these deeper aspects. I can get behind that. I think this is a real tough conversation, or educational lesson for me and Sean to wrap our heads around, because we've kind of put it in the pocket of mythology and religion, which is notoriously loose as it is, because it comes from a time far beyond us, and it can be lost through translation, or most folklores at the time of its conception wasn't even written down. It was passed verbally. So like, there's a lot of pieces that could be missed, a lot of inaccuracies. I'm trying to stay in that pocket, but I'm also just trying to grand scale it to like just cultural things. If you're writing a book on a people's culture, you should probably endeavor to do your homework and be, respectful in the regards of not trying to make parody of it or anything like that. Yeah. Unless you're trying to go like you said, own it. If you're trying to do like a full-on Blazing Saddles things where you're just like, we're going to make fun of it, and we are aware that we're making fun of it, that's a different comedy, is a different horse altogether.
That actually reminds me of a question that we had looked over with this whole subject matter, and it fits into your larger scale of looking at it, Ryan. When you say that you say the author should be intentional, and I agree with that 100%. Do you feel like the readers or need to see an acknowledgement, like, I did this much research? Do you do that, or is that just something where you did it, you published the book, and you don't say anything about it, like, in the back cover?
It definitely doesn't make it into the blurb, I'll tell you that, because like, I did so much research on indigenous culture that you have no idea. Buy this book. That doesn't sell books.
Sure.
It isn't even interesting. Except in like talks like this, I have talked so much about the work that I've done in all of my different series for getting it right, because I do feel like, again, if the intention is to get it right, then you have an obligation to get it as right as possible. And so I've talked at length about how I've done this in most of my books. I will say my first series is a dark comedy. I get away with more in the first book because I'm funny than, maybe other books do. Because I definitely portray, as an example, like, I played faster and looser with Christian mythos because I am not Christian. I'm Jewish. So same rough deities, but not the same. And I've definitely made choices based on other things. So, for example, in my second book, like, I portray God as non-binary, but like canonically, like, God, like, Dogma had made God Alanis Morissette, and everyone was thrilled by that. So like, you can make choices that are gonna it's gonna offend a small pocket or even big pocket of people, but also I feel like things like Christianity and even Judaism, though more so Christianity, it's you want to punch up, don't punch down. So like, Christianity is a big kid. It can take it. Like, it can take a little bit of fun having that, like, other less populated, less well-known religions maybe can't. So like again, it's that concept of am I punching up against a monolith that can handle it, or am I punching down against a marginalized community that doesn't deserve it? So like if I poke a little bit of fun at some of the Christian mythos while still like I have plenty of Christians that read my series and love the way that I handle the mythology, but I have plenty that would also hate it. But at the same time, like I'm not going to do the same thing with my series that focuses on indigenous myths and magic, because that's also like it is a population of people that have been systemically harmed over a long period of time, and that would be like punching down to in any way make light or fun of that. I wanted to get that more right than I wanted to get the other stuff right.
Yeah, I mean that's a hard conversation to get in. I for the purposes of our show, I think probably best to not. But I will say that kind of does lead me into, because like I was saying initially, like I'm kind of viewing this as a more of a than just a mythology thing, more of a cultural conversation when you're writing. I guess my next question was, do you feel like as writers we should kind of seek permission or consultation when we want to kind of write these things?
So again, it's so okay. We're gonna,
and again, I'm talking more of like just the, like you're trying to, let's say initially you began saying like you wrote your story, you didn't want to write it from the perspective of a Native American.
Yeah.
And so you opted for someone else. If you chose to, do you feel like that should be something you feel like you should kind of seek permission to do, or at least bring on someone to counsel you through that writing?
That second one. So this comes up a lot when we talk about things like writing from a perspective that is not our own. If we're writing from a cultural or societal perspective that we are not able to like, that we don't personally represent, it can be very difficult to A, get it right, and B, readers really do often care whether or not the author, they feel like it's appropriate for an author to write from a certain perspective. So like men writing women main characters, women writing men main characters, that's pretty normal. No one's going to freak out if I write a story with a female MC. But what people will have a problem with is if I write from a perspective of a female MC and then try to portray like feminist concepts or even just feminine female concepts and I get it wrong. Like the number of men that write women badly, and when I say badly, I mean like horrendously badly, like they don't even understand how female biology works, and they'll write stories from a female perspective, including such details as do not literally exist in the universe, but not because they've made an intentional choice, but because they don't care enough to do enough education for themselves to know how any of that works. So like that's just scratching the surface. Like writing from the perspective of a Black character, writing from the perspective of a gay character, writing from the perspective of a Hindu person. So I feel like you have an obligation to, if you're going to write from that perspective, if your main character or even like big supporting character is living this experience in your world, you have more of an obligation to at least know what you're doing. So I don't think you need permission, but I think you have a heavier obligation, and it is easier to get it wrong if you don't do it in consultation with somebody you know, or find somebody online, or look for groups of people who are interested in those things. I'm Jewish. I still found someone to consult on my Jewish book because I don't know enough about Jewish scripture to have gotten it right without consulting someone else. And I was bar mitzvahed at 13. Granted, I haven't been to temple in like 20 years, but nonetheless, I know more than the average person about Judaism, and yet I still took it upon myself to get help because it would be very easy for me to screw that up in a way that is materially incorrect.
I really like what you're saying, and you do leave it open for everybody to do it their own way, even if it's a really crappy one. Was it you that was telling me a while back when I interviewed you about it? Was it Book Talk, and it was a bunch of guys writing as women or whatever?
That was Atomic Apple Pie, one of my favorite Book Talk creators, reading romance written by men badly. And that was in fact the inspiration for me to dust off my manuscript and publish it. And here I am 3 years later with soon to be 7+2 published works. Yeah.
Yep. And teaching us on Down to Fitz.
Yeah, and sorry, just to be super clear, and I appreciate you acknowledging that. Like, I am not here to tell anyone what to do. I'm not here to tell anyone that you're doing it wrong. I'm also not here to tell you you're doing it right, because I don't know what you're doing. It's in your head and in your email. But like, again, back to the intentionality and the obligation, it really varies on how deep down the rabbit hole you go.
Yeah, and so one thing that you've both said so far that I think is absolutely true and really valuable for anybody who's getting ready to write a story that is at least partially founded in any kind of real world mythology or religion or anything, you stumble into something that might explode the creativity of your story and make it a lot cooler than you knew it at first that it was going to be. And I think that it's a good enough time into the conversation where what I'd like for you to do, as long as Ryan doesn't object, is maybe start talking to people. I know, why am I being so considerate of you today? I might have a fever.
I think so. You got a bug or something.
He's got the fits.
I'm unwell. I do. But I'd like for you to kind of talk about some of the things. Like, let's say that there's an author that's coming out, gonna write a book and everything, and they want to be as accurate as you've made the effort to be. How does your research process start? How do you reach out to people that you want to consult with and things like that? Like, so that people can watch this video and know, like, okay, well, I know that I have the options to do these things.
Yeah. So number one, you can start with like the primary source material. So again, this gets into research mode, which is primary sources versus secondary sources versus tertiary sources. Primary sources are like from the horse's mouth, either in written, audio, or other formats. So just as an example, if I want to look up something, I made a joke in the first book about the meaning of the word Satan. And I went and I looked it up, and I got something from primary source material about what that word meant and what it was translated to. And I made the joke about it, and there you go. It's in the first 3 chapters. But I went myself, found some source material, looked at it, said, yeah, that validates the thing that I want to do, and I don't need to think too hard about it. You can do that kind of research. I'm a huge fan of, just-in-time research, which means I'm in the middle of writing a scene and I am not sure of a thing. I'm going to go find out. So long as it isn't something that I really need confirmation about, I feel pretty confident going to primary or even secondary sources, that being someone writing about the thing that was written about as a primary source.
Okay.
But you have to be careful once you start getting outside of the primary sources, because do people have opinions about the things that they're writing about. And just because person number 2 wrote an essay about the meaning of the word Satan that doesn't actually mean that that essay is correct. That means that that's that person writing about a thing. And, you know, it's like Wikipedia. People think you can't use Wikipedia for primary source research, and you really can't. However, what you can use is all of the footnotes at the bottom of Wikipedia. Start if you need to, like, I'm old enough that Encyclopedia Britannica used to be a thing and is, you know, has not been for a very long time. But Wikipedia is great because I can go to the page on Christianity, and then I can go to the bottom where all the sources are, you know, I can find a thing that looks neat. I go to the source that's cited at the bottom and I go there, and if it's not a primary source, it's probably going to lead me to one. I've wrote more than one research paper in college based on using Wikipedia as my spider's web to find primary source material.
Okay.
So like, step number one is once you've after you've decided what it is that you want to do, you know, step number one is go do some research about it. Do at least some light reading about the stuff that you're thinking about incorporating into your book. But then also, you know, step two is decide how deep this rabbit hole goes. Because again, if you are not writing from a perspective that is not your own, if you're not trying to get all the details right, that might be all the research you need. Step two is I am doing something that I really think that could use a second set of eyes on, or I would really like to talk this through with somebody. And then you go find people. The web is still your friend. I have found all of the people that I've contacted for every bit of research that I did, other than a few like friends that I have made that were Hindu that I consulted on book 3, where I start introducing a Hindu deity and some Hindu mythology. But I found everyone online, and you reach out to them. Like I know we're all authors, which means that 90% of us are supposed to be introverts, but you're going to have to not do that.
Nope,
You're going to have
out.
to. That's it. We're all done. You're going to have to reach out to people, send an email, introduce yourself, tell them what it is that you want to do, and ask for what you need. And that's how, you know, just a shout out to Clan Mother Shorin Piper of the Golden Hill Pockets, who is one of the few people that wrote back to my many emails to many representatives from many different tribes about the work that I wanted to do for this story. And I just reached out and I said, hey, I'm an indie author and I'm trying to do this what I feel is the right way, and I would really like to talk with you about my ideas and bounce them off of you if you'd be interested in chatting about it. And we went back and forth over email a few times, and everything sounded okay to her. I actually did buy, like, there's a short book that she wrote about some Algonquin. So the group of tribes, there's the Algonquin tribes, of which the Golden Hill Poggosets, the Quinnipiac, and many others are a part of.
Okay.
But she wrote a book, like a short book about that I also picked up, because that is a member of a, you know, living tribe who wrote a book about a lot of their cultural and spiritual practices. So then that became a source that I used for the book. So yeah, step number 1 is do your homework. Step number 2 is decide if you need to reach out to someone. And then step 3 is, I'm sorry, so sorry, but you actually have to do the reaching out part.
One thing I can definitely get behind, which I think boils down to the essence of what you're saying, is that at a bare minimum, the result of what you can achieve by doing a little bit of this stuff we were talking about is, like, you can help decrease the amount of, like, perpetuated beliefs. And a good, very soft pedaled example would be like how, like, in books and movies, you keep hearing people describe the definition of insanity, which is not the definition of insanity, but they keep reiterating it over and over, and then it's like, well, then that kind of boils down into the zeitgeist of us, and now we think that's the definition of insanity. And so, yeah, if we can avoid doing that, I think that's a good measure. So anything we're doing to kind of help keep us on track of what is and isn't true regarding ourselves or in other people is probably a wise choice. So I can definitely agree with that as a sentiment.
Ryan, do you want to do a Dear Duncan? Do we have a Dear Duncan?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I wasn't paying attention earlier. Yeah, let's go ahead and jump to the studio, Sean.
All right.
By the powers of the internet and our friends
I hate you so
JZ
much.
Printing, this is our lovely overlay here in our Dear Duncan Studios. As always, people submit some things. We try to provide whatever advice we can. I'll just get right into it because we're running a little short on time. Dear Duncan, my beta readers have returned feedback on my novel. One says the story is too slow. Another says it's too fast. A third says it's perfect except for all the parts they didn't like. Who am I supposed to listen to? That was set in by critiqued into confusion.
Well, critiqued into confusion. Mixed messages are hard. I will say that Let's Sleep in God's Light, no one agrees on the pacing of that book. Some people think that it's fast-paced and great. Some people think that it's slow. Some people think that it's too fast. And literally no one agrees. Therefore, I listen to no one. If your readers don't agree, it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with your book. This is the tough part also, because like if you have an editor, your editor can often tell you how the pacing of your book is from their professional perspective, because as an author, I write a book and then I think the pacing is good. And then I have to hand it to some other person. And like beta readers and alpha readers are good for that because that's like before you get to a paid editor. So your betas all come back and they're like, the pacing's all messed up, or this is the best book I've ever read, or this pacing is too fast or slow. And if no one agrees, I would hazard to say that other than maybe getting a couple other readers and then seeing if anything lines up, you have to decide if it's worth it to you to try to massage that. If everyone thinks the pacing is wrong somehow, there may be something systemic with your story that you want to address. Maybe the pacing is a bit like sawtooth and you need to smooth it out somewhere. But if it's just generally feedback of like, well, the book was kind of slow paced, well, the book was kind of fast paced, like these are at odds and aren't necessarily indicative of anything other than that reader's experience. And so you have to be careful, because sometimes you should make a change because your readers give you feedback, and sometimes you should acknowledge that they have feedback and maybe it is individual to their experience. This is one of those tough times.
What do you think, Sean?
I think that they should probably get different beta readers than the three bears from the Goldilocks story. I mean, as a serious option, like you could try brushing it through different people, expand your the net that you're trying to capture opinions in, and see if one particular opinion begins to kind of swell over a larger, what is the word? I'm having a brain fart. Focus group. No, whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah, but like, the more people that you're getting that kind of feedback from, you might get a different, an opinion that sparks through. If you're only getting it from 3 people, try a 4th and 5th, I would say. Otherwise, listen to Ben.
Yeah, I would say my advice in this would be twofold. Either A, take a note from Ben and view your own intent. Like maybe you meant to write a slow story And if they're saying it's fast, that could be a problem,
Hmm.
or vice versa. Or it could literally just boil down to certain segments probably are slower than the reader themselves anticipated them being, and that's just an editing thing. Maybe shorten some sentences, kind of get through some material a little bit faster, not necessarily like chapter changing or anything like that. Just kind of, quicken the pace just a smidge, and that might be enough.
Yeah.
That's my advice. I hope anyone that heard that critiqued Into Confusion, I hope that helped you.
Yeah, critiqued middle name into.
Into. I hope the whole Confusion house is better for our advice.
The House of Confusion.
Well, Ben, before we go, I'd like to give you an opportunity, kind of tell people what you got going on coming up.
I have so many things going on. First and foremost, people should go to Kickstarter and follow 2 campaigns that are in pre-launch. So they're both going to be starting in September, within like 2 weeks of each other. One is a multi-genre anthology called The Rings of Adventure that I have written a short story for. It's fantastic. It's got like more than 30 stories, I think. It's big. It's got some great names in it. Multi-genre fantasy and sci-fi. So it's got something for everybody. Next up is I am one of the organizers for this one. This is an urban fantasy anthology called Arcane Awakenings, focused on the origin stories of urban fantasy stories. So it's 18 authors, 17 stories, and it's going to be fantastic. I'm so excited for that. So go follow both of those campaigns. And then the 4th and last book in my first series, The Devil You Know, is slated now to come out October 19th. So definitely go check out all of my work. You can find me at benschenkman.com. You can sign up to be a beta reader or an ARC reader for my work there. But that the 4th book of that first series that I'm very excited for is coming out soon. So join my newsletter and keep in touch, and I can't wait to share that with folks.
And Ben will be back in sometime in season 3 early on to talk about the final installment of his series. And so you need to make sure that you subscribe, like the video, share the video to all the author people, and share it to your reader friends so that they know to hop on, hear about the story, and realize they should have bought every book already and read them all and left reviews. Ryan, what do you got?
Just one final question.
Oh.
Hey, Sean.
Yes?
How do we end these?
Deliberately.